Marcus Chen's day began the way it always did, at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm, in the narrow bedroom of his duplex on the edge of Riverside. The walls were bare except for a single commendation plaque and a photograph of his mother, taken years before the cancer. He lay still for a moment, listening to the hum of the climate regulator and the distant whir of autonomous delivery drones making their morning rounds. Through the window, the sky was shifting from deep purple to a bruised pink, the kind of dawn that looked almost analog, almost real. He dressed in silence. Navy pants, station-issued shirt with the Riverside Fire Rescue patch on the sleeve, boots that had been resoled twice. His reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man who looked older than 34 in some ways, younger in others. Soot seemed permanently embedded in the creases around his eyes, but there was something unlined about his expression, something that hadn't hardened the way it had in so many others. He ran water over his face, the cold biting and immediate, and tried not to think about the evening ahead. Station 47 sat at the intersection of Old Mill Road and the crumbling remains of what used to be Highway 9, back before the autonomous transit grid made highways obsolete. The building itself was a relic, brick and mortar instead of the prefab carbon fiber modules that comprised most of the new civic structures downtown. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, diesel, and the ghost of 1,000 emergencies. Marcus pushed through the bay doors and found his captain, Joe Reeves, already at the desk, squinting at a holographic incident report that floated in the air like smoke. "Chen," Joe said without looking up. "You're early. Traffic was light. Traffic's always light when you don't own a car." Joe waved his hand and the hologram dissolved. He was 62, had been doing this job since before Marcus was born, and had the kind of face that made people confess things they hadn't planned to. "Big night tonight, right? Your sister's thing?" Marcus opened his locker. Inside were the same photographs he'd carried for years, Dante and 3 other kids from the youth center, grinning in front of a mural they'd painted. His mother at the pier, wind in her hair. A faded image of his father and Victoria, back when they still smiled at each other. "Anniversary gala," he said. "You don't sound thrilled." "It's fine, Chen, I've known you 12 years. When you say fine, you mean the opposite." Joe leaned back in his chair, the old metal frame creaking. "You don't have to go, you know. You're an adult. You're allowed to say no." Marcus pulled on his jacket. "She's still my sister, yeah, and I'm still married to my ex-wife's cousin, but you don't see me volunteering for Thanksgiving." Joe's expression softened. "Look, I get it. Family's family. Just don't let them make you feel small. You're worth 10 of those country club types." Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't explain that it wasn't about feeling small, it was about the exhaustion of being constantly measured, constantly found wanting, constantly reminded that his choices were incomprehensible to people who'd never had to choose between meaning and money. He closed the locker and headed for the equipment bay. The morning passed in the usual rhythm. A medical call at dawn, elderly woman, chest pain, false alarm, but they stayed until her daughter arrived. A small kitchen fire in one of the old residential blocks, extinguished before it could spread. Marcus moved through it all with the kind of muscle memory that came from repetition. From drilling the same scenarios until your body responded before your brain caught up. His crew was good: Hansen, Ortiz, the new kid Rodriguez who asked too many questions but had steady hands. They trusted him. That counted for something. At noon, his phone buzzed. The display showed Victoria's contact photo, professionally shot, her smile calibrated for maximum warmth while revealing nothing. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Marcus, darling, you are coming tonight, aren't you?" Her voice had that quality, light, musical, edged with something harder underneath. Marcus leaned against the side of the engine, watching Rodriguez practice hose deployment across the lot. "I said I would." "I know, but you've been so busy lately, and I just wanted to make sure. Richard's partners will be there. Very influential people. There's someone from Helix Corp, and you know they're pioneering the Neuralink emergency response systems. Maybe you could network a little?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Vic, I'm not looking to network, I'm just saying, you can't be a firefighter forever. At some point, you have to think about your future. Dad's company is still, I'm thinking about my future every time I pull someone out of a burning building. A pause. He could hear the recalculation happening, the slight adjustment of approach. Of course. I didn't mean it like that. You do important work. I just worry about you, that's all. You're my baby brother, I'll be there at 6:30, she corrected. Cocktails start at 6:30. And Marcus? Try to wear the suit I sent you last Christmas. The navy one. It photographs well. After she hung up, Joe appeared at his elbow. Let me guess. She wants you to network, she wants me to be someone I'm not, then don't be. Show up, smile, leave. You don't owe them a performance, but Marcus knew it was never that simple. With Victoria, with his father, with the entire extended ecosystem of the Chin-Thornwood merger, everything was a performance. Success was measured in metrics that appeared on social feeds and professional profiles. In the quality of your neural implants and the prestige of your address. His duplex in Riverside didn't even register on their scale. Neither did his salary, his crew, or the thank you notes from families he'd helped. Those things were invisible to people who'd gamified their entire existence. He spent the afternoon at the youth center, a concrete block building that had been scheduled for demolition 3 times and somehow survived each reprieve. Dante was there, hunched over a tablet, working through college application essays. At 17, he had the kind of wary intelligence that came from learning early that the world wasn't built for people like him, kids aging out of foster care. Kids without trust funds or family connections or the right kind of genetic enhancements. How's it going? Marcus asked, pulling up a chair. Dante didn't look up. They want to know why I want to study engineering. Like there's supposed to be some inspirational story. My parents were engineers, so I want to honor their legacy. I built my first robot at age 6. I just want to learn how things work. Is that not good enough? It's good enough, Marcus said. Write that, they'll reject me, maybe. But at least you'll be telling the truth. Dante finally looked up. His eyes were the color of old copper, sharp and searching. You really believe that? That the truth matters more than the story? Marcus thought about his father's tech empire, built on sleek narratives and venture capital. Thought about Victoria's marriage, a merger dressed up as romance. Thought about every family gathering where he'd been introduced as the firefighter, the subtext always clear, the one who couldn't hack it in the real world. Yeah, he said. I believe it. Your family doesn't get it, do they? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Dante had been around long enough to see the way Victoria's messages made Marcus's jaw tighten, the way he never talked about his father except in past tense, as if Robert Chen had died instead of just becoming a stranger. The kid was smart like that, saw things other people missed. They worked through the essays until the light through the windows turned orange and Marcus had to leave. On his way out, Dante called after him. Hey, Marcus, yeah, you're still the realest person I know. The word stayed with him on the drive home, through the shower, through the ritual of getting dressed in the suit Victoria had sent, navy, perfectly tailored, probably cost more than his monthly rent. He stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized himself. This wasn't his world. These weren't his clothes. But Victoria was still his sister, and some obligations ran deeper than comfort. The Thornwood estate sat 40 minutes outside the city, in one of those gated enclaves where the houses were called residences and the landscaping had its own maintenance staff. Marcus's sedan, 12 years old, manual drive, embarrassingly analog, looked wrong pulling up the circular driveway behind a fleet of sleek autonomous vehicles. A valet in white gloves actually hesitated before approaching, as if uncertain whether Marcus's car belonged in the parking area or should be directed to the service entrance. Inside, the house was exactly what Marcus expected, soaring ceilings, walls that shifted between transparent and opaque depending on the ambient light, holographic art that responded to viewer movement. A string quartet played in one corner, their music piped through the house's integrated sound system so it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Guests drifted through rooms like expensive ghosts, their clothes projecting subtle status signals through embedded smart fabric, designer labels, custom genetic markers, real-time biometric data that announced their fitness, their youth, their superiority. Victoria found him within minutes. She looked perfect, which was both a statement and a warning. Her dress was pearl-colored, shifting through subtle gradients that complemented her skin tone, her hair swept up in a style that probably required an hour with a professional stylist and some kind of follicle-stabilizing treatment. She air-kissed both his cheeks, her perfume sharp and expensive. "Marcus. You came. And you're wearing the suit, it looks wonderful on you." "Very." She paused, searching for the word. "Nostalgic." Richard appeared behind her, scotch in hand, smile professionally maintained. "Marcus. The working man arrives. Still saving cats from trees, or have you graduated to actual emergencies?" "Just people," Marcus said. "Mostly people. Well, that's important work." "Truly. We need people willing to do jobs like that. Not everyone can be in the private sector." After all, they were joined by Victoria's friend Claudia, a woman whose face had the unnaturally smooth quality of someone who'd opted for cellular regeneration treatments. She looked at Marcus with the kind of bright curiosity usually reserved for museum exhibits. "Oh, you're the firefighter. That's so authentic. Do you actually slide down those poles?" "Only on Tuesdays," Marcus said. She laughed, uncertain if he was joking. Richard steered them toward the dining room, where tables had been arranged around a central dance floor. Holographic displays floated above each setting, showing the guests' professional profiles, net worth, achievements, social metrics. Marcus's display was conspicuously minimal. Education, years of service, certifications. No wealth indicators. No investment portfolio. No board positions or advisory roles. He ended up seated between Gerald, one of Richard's business partners, and a woman whose name he immediately forgot. Gerald had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, his suit projecting a subtle augmented reality overlay that highlighted his recent merger acquisition. "So, Marcus," Gerald said, cutting into something that might have been steak but had probably been synthesized in a lab. "What's the endgame?" "Pension and a gold watch." "In our world, that's called a rounding error, different metrics," Marcus said. Sure. But seriously, your father's company has executive positions." Victoria's mentioned it. "Why not leverage the family connection? Get into the real game." "This is the real game," Gerald laughed, the sound genuine. "I respect that. Principles. But principles don't compound at 8% annually." Across the table, Victoria touched his hand, her expression arranged into performative sympathy. "Marcus just has different priorities. He's our family's conscience." The table chuckled, a soft ripple of agreement. The subtext was clear: Marcus was the noble failure. The one who'd chosen meaning over money and would spend the rest of his life regretting it. They could afford to be generous because his existence validated their choices. Someone had to play the martyr so the rest could feel justified in their excess. After dinner, Marcus escaped to the terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of genetically modified jasmine from the garden below. The city glowed in the distance, a sprawl of light and data, constant communication humming through the air like electronic insects. He leaned against the railing and tried to remember why he kept doing this, kept showing up, kept subjecting himself to their barely concealed contempt. "Your mother would have wanted you there." His father's voice. Marcus didn't turn around. Robert Chen moved like a corporate specter, silent and inevitable, his presence announced by the subtle shift in air pressure and the faint ozone smell of expensive tech. He'd had neural enhancements 2 years ago, his cognition boosted, his processing speed optimized. Sometimes when Marcus looked at him, he couldn't find the man who used to take him fishing, who used to laugh at stupid jokes. That version of Robert Chen had been optimized into obsolescence. "Mom wanted me happy," Marcus said. "And are you? Happy driving a truck for the city while your sister builds empires?" Victoria married an empire. "There's a difference." Robert moved beside him, his reflection ghostly in the glass railing. "You had potential, Marcus." Past tense. MIT accepted you. Full scholarship. You could have done anything. I am doing something. You're wasting yourself on people who'll never appreciate it. The city can't even afford to pay you properly. You're running into fires for $50,000 a year while Richard's junior analysts make triple that. How is that potential realized? Marcus finally looked at his father. There were augmentation scars at his temples, subtle but visible if you knew where to look. Enhancement ports at the base of his skull. Robert Chen had become a hybrid, more efficient, less human. Maybe potential isn't about optimization, Marcus said. Maybe it's about knowing who you are. Philosophy, Robert said, the word dismissive. Your mother's influence. She always valued feeling over function. He turned to leave, then paused. There's still a position waiting. VP of Safety Operations. You'd be overseeing implementation of emergency protocols across our facilities. Real impact, real salary. The offer expires when I retire, which is soon. Think about it. After he left, Marcus stood alone on the terrace, the weight of disappointment so familiar it felt like comfort. Inside, the party continued, voices rising and falling, laughter that sounded like currency exchanging hands, the constant underlying hum of people performing success for each other's feeds. His cousins found him near the bar. Trevor had the kind of manufactured friendliness that made Marcus's teeth ache, all backslapping and insider jokes. Amanda orbited nearby, her neural implant recording everything, her social feed updating in real time. She'd made a career out of documenting the family, turning their private moments into content, their relationships into engagement metrics. Dude, Trevor said, already 3 drinks past professional. When are you gonna monetize that hero complex? Seriously. Start a consulting firm, fire safety for Fortune 500s. I'd invest. We could make you a brand. I'm not interested in being a brand, everyone's a brand, Marcus. You just haven't figured out your market positioning. Trevor leaned closer, his breath bourbon sweet. Think about it. You've got the authentic thing going. Blue-collar credibility. That plays well with certain demographics. We could leverage it. Amanda was already taking photos, her feed caption probably something about family and inspiration, hashtags carefully curated for maximum reach. Marcus gently extracted himself, mumbling something about needing air, and headed toward the exit. He almost made it. In the hallway, hidden by the curve of the staircase, he heard their voices. Victoria and Richard, thinking they were alone. Marcus stopped, not meaning to eavesdrop but unable to move, frozen by the familiar cadence of their contempt. I don't know why he insists on embarrassing us, Victoria said. Gerald asked if Marcus was financially stable in front of everyone. What am I supposed to say? That my brother makes poverty wages by choice. Guy probably Googles billionaire just to know what one looks like. Richard laughed. Meanwhile, we're footing the bill for Dad's guilt trips. The suit, the invitations, pretending like he belongs here. Next year, we'll seat him with the staff. That way at least the table composition makes sense. They laughed together, the sound intimate and cruel. Marcus stood with his keys in his hand, something hard and cold forming in his chest, not anger exactly, more like the final calcification of understanding. He'd always known how they saw him. This wasn't revelation. This was confirmation. He left without saying goodbye, the valet scrambling to retrieve his car, probably relieved to see the embarrassing vehicle leaving the property. The drive home was quiet except for the engine's familiar rumble, a sound he found oddly comforting in its mechanical honesty. His phone buzzed with a message from Dante. Hope the fancy party didn't suck too bad. You're still the realest person I know. Marcus smiled for the first time all night. It was 11:47 p.m. when the sky split open. The sound came first, not quite thunder, more like reality tearing along a seam it wasn't supposed to have. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel as he looked up through the windshield. Seeing the trail of fire streaking across the darkness, engines screaming, the shape of a private jet fighting physics and losing. He watched it descend toward the field adjacent to the highway, the landing gear deployed but the angle all wrong, everything wrong. Training took over. He pulled to the shoulder, already hitting 911 on his phone, already throwing open the door. The dispatcher's voice crackled, nature of emergency? And Marcus was running, phone pressed to his ear, dress shoes skidding on gravel, aircraft emergency landing, highway 9-mile marker 43. Private jet, looks like engine failure. It's going down now, the impact shook the ground. Metal shrieked. Marcus saw the fuselage hit, skip, flip, the wings shearing off, fuel igniting in orange blooms. He ran faster, his lungs burning, his brain cataloging everything, wind direction, fuel spread, time before total conflagration. Minutes. Maybe less, sir, emergency services are en route. Do not approach the aircraft, he dropped the phone. Smoke was already choking the air, acrid and chemical, the kind that stripped your throat raw. Marcus pulled his jacket over his mouth and dropped to a crouch, moving toward the torn opening in the fuselage. Heat pressed against him like a physical weight. Inside, emergency lights flickered, casting everything in red. 2 bodies in the cockpit, both still, both beyond help. 1 passenger in the main cabin, a woman, unconscious, seatbelt twisted around her like restraints. Late 20s, dark hair matted with blood, expensive clothes torn and soot-stained. Marcus crawled forward, his hands finding the seatbelt release, his training overriding the part of his brain that was screaming about the fuel. The fire, the seconds ticking down. He cut through the tangled straps with his pocket knife, got his arms under her shoulders, lifted her into a fireman's carry. Behind him, something exploded, small, contained, but it wouldn't stay that way. Marcus moved, his legs burning, his lungs desperate for clean air. The woman's weight was slight but felt massive, every step a negotiation between momentum and collapse. He cleared the wreckage and kept going, putting distance between them and the jet, counting steps, 10, 20, 30. The explosion threw them both forward. Marcus twisted, taking the impact on his shoulder, shielding her body with his. Heat washed over them, debris raining down. The sound so loud it seemed to erase all other sound. Then silence, broken only by the roar of flames and his own ragged breathing. The woman coughed. Marcus rolled her onto her side, checking her airway, his hands moving through the familiar choreography of triage. Pulse steady. Breathing regular but shallow. Possible concussion, probable broken ribs, definitely in shock. He lifted her again, this time cradling her carefully, and carried her toward his truck. She woke in the passenger seat, confusion and terror warring in her eyes. Marcus was checking her pupils with his phone flashlight, one hand on her wrist monitoring her pulse, the radio crackling with dispatch updates. Ambulance is 30 minutes out. Stay with me. What's your name? She stared at him, her mouth working soundlessly. Finally, Nat Natasha, her voice was raw, damaged by smoke. Marcus wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, noticing for the first time that she was trembling. Okay, Natasha. You're safe. I'm Marcus. You're going to be fine. He started the engine, heading toward the nearest hospital because 30 minutes was too long, protocol be damned. Natasha watched him with an intensity that felt almost physical, her gaze tracking his movements as he drove one-handed, the other still on her wrist, counting heartbeats. You pulled me out, she said. That's the job. What job? Firefighter. Paramedic. Professional disaster responder. He glanced at her wrist, noticed the watch, sleek, expensive, probably worth more than his annual salary. That's a nice watch. Probably worth more than my truck. You somebody important? She hesitated, something flickering across her face. Not really, Marcus smiled despite the adrenaline still singing in his veins. Well, not really, you've got a hell of a story now. He fumbled in the glove box, found a granola bar, offered it to her. She took it with trembling hands, and something in her expression cracked, not dramatically, but like ice melting at the edges. She looked at him like he was something unexpected, something that didn't fit her understanding of how the world worked. Thank you, she whispered, don't thank me yet. Wait until we know you're okay. They drove in silence, Natasha eating the granola bar in small bites, Marcus monitoring her vitals, both of them smelling like smoke and jet fuel and survival. The hospital appeared on the horizon, white and sterile and blazing with light. Marcus pulled up to the emergency entrance and everything changed. Men in black suits materialized. Hospital administrators appeared, their expressions shifting from routine to crisis mode. A doctor rushed out, calling Ms. Volkov, "Thank God," and Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him in a way that had nothing to do with explosions. "Volkov?" As in, a security officer gripped his hand. Formal and intense. "Sir, you saved Natasha Volkov, founder and CEO of Volkov AI Industries." The Natasha Volkov. Marcus looked at the woman being transferred to a gurney, her eyes still on him, and saw something in her expression that looked like regret, or longing, or maybe both. She was being wheeled away, surrounded by personnel, already disappearing into the machinery of her life, and Marcus stood in the emergency bay with soot on his face and his sister's expensive suit ruined, realizing that the woman he'd pulled from burning wreckage wasn't just anyone, she was worth $40 billion, give or take, and for 30 minutes in his truck, eating his granola bar, she'd been just Natasha. Marcus Chin stood in the doorway of his sister's mansion, watching a drone caterer glide past with a tray of champagne flutes that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The thing chirped softly, its AI menu cycling through vintage years on a holographic display. Behind it, the great room sprawled in calculated perfection, floor-to-ceiling smart glass walls that shifted from transparent to privacy-tinted based on proximity sensors, furniture that cost what most people made in a year, guests whose net worth collectively could fund a small nation. He'd worn his cleanest shirt. It still wasn't clean enough, Marcus. Victoria appeared from a cluster of tech executives, her smile bright and empty as chrome. She air-kissed near his cheek, close enough to perform affection, far enough to avoid actual contact. "You made it. I wasn't sure you'd come, you sent 3 reminders to my feed." He kept his voice neutral. His sister had upgraded to the latest social interface implant, a subtle glimmer at her temple that let her access her networks with a thought. Marcus still used his handheld like a barbarian. "Did I? The AI handles most of my scheduling now." She touched his elbow, steering him deeper into the room. Her dress probably had more computing power than his entire apartment. "Come, you remember Richard," her husband materialized with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd made a career of appearing at opportune moments. Richard Thornwood extended his hand, and Marcus shook it, feeling the slight resistance of the man's biometric ring scanning him. Everything was data. Everyone was quantifiable. "Marcus. Good to see you." Richard's tone suggested it was anything but. "Still with the fire department, still saving lives," Marcus said. Of course, of course. "Noble work." Richard's attention had already shifted to someone over Marcus's shoulder, someone more important. "Excuse me, Senator Harrigan just arrived." Victoria lingered a moment longer, her smile tightening at the edges. "Mingle. There's food, obviously. The sushi chef is using that new molecular technique, you'll love it." She paused. "Recalibrating. Or there's regular food in the kitchen. If you prefer, regular food." He watched her glide away, her dress shifting colors with her mood, currently a serene blue that broadcast calm, confidence, control. When they were kids, she'd stolen his lunch money to buy manga. Now she owned 3 tech startups and had forgotten he existed except when she needed to check the family obligation box. He moved toward the kitchen because spite was petty but satisfying. The hallway was quieter, lined with abstract art that shifted and morphed, digital canvases cycling through whatever the algorithm determined matched the room's aesthetic. One piece caught his eye, a swirl of flame and shadow. He stopped, studying it. "Hideous, isn't it?" Marcus turned. A woman stood in the intersecting hallway, holding a champagne flute and looking at the art with open disdain. She was around his age, dark hair pulled back, wearing a simple black dress that somehow cost nothing and everything simultaneously. No visible tech, no status jewelry, no augmented reality makeup that shifted based on lighting. "I was thinking pretentious," Marcus said. "That too." She sipped her champagne. "Let me guess, you're not one of the usual crowd. That obvious? You're looking at the art like it's supposed to mean something. Everyone else just checks the artist's market value on their feed." She tilted her head. Also, your shirt has a button missing. Marcus glanced down. Third button, hanging by a thread. Laundry incident, tragic. But she was smiling, just slightly. I'm going to hate myself for asking, but, are you Victoria's brother? Guilty. You here for the spectacle? Something like that. She moved closer, studying him the way she'd studied the art. She talks about you sometimes. The firefighter. The one who chose differently. She make it sound like a compliment, she made it sound like a curiosity. Like someone who speaks a language she used to know but can't quite remember. The woman extended her hand. I'm Natasha. Her grip was firm, no bioscanners. No performance. Just a handshake. Marcus liked her immediately, which meant she was probably married to a venture capitalist or owned a media empire. Marcus. And yeah, I'm the family disappointment. Are you disappointed? The question landed differently than expected. Not rhetorical. Actually curious. No, he said, surprising himself with the honesty. But they are. Their loss. Natasha finished her champagne, set the glass on a passing drone's tray with practiced ease. The kitchen, you said? I could use some regular food myself. They walked together, and Marcus tried not to notice the way she moved, confident but careful, like someone used to being watched but tired of performing. The kitchen was enormous and mercifully empty, all smart appliances and gleaming surfaces. He found bread, actual bread, and started making a sandwich. Want one? He offered. God, yes. They ate standing at the counter, and it felt absurdly normal. Through the doorway, the party continued, a symphony of networking and social climbing, everyone's implants glowing faintly as they exchanged contact information with a thought. Checked stock prices, documented moments for their feeds. Do you ever miss it? Natasha asked. Being part of that world, I was never part of it. Victoria was the golden child. I was the project that didn't pan out. What did they want you to be? Anything expensive. Doctor, lawyer, tech executive. Something they could quantify at parties. He took another bite, chewed, swallowed. What about you? What's your quantifiable achievement? She laughed, short and sharp. You really don't know who I am, should I? Most people do. It's... She paused, something shifting in her expression. Vulnerability, maybe. Or relief. It's exhausting. Before Marcus could respond, Trevor crashed into the kitchen. His cousin's augmented reality contact lenses flickering with social media feeds. He stopped short, seeing them. Marcus. There you are. And, holy shit. Trevor's eyes widened, his feed probably screaming notifications. Natasha Volkov. You're Natasha Volkov. The woman, Natasha Volkov, apparently, sighed. And you're about to be very loud about it. You're eating a sandwich in Victoria's kitchen. Trevor looked between them, recalibrating the social mathematics. With Marcus, he makes good sandwiches, Natasha said. Marcus pieced it together, the name, Trevor's reaction, the careful anonymity. You're the tech person. The AI ethics thing, among other things. She met his eyes. Does it matter, should it? Trevor made a strangled noise. Dude, she's worth like $40 billion, Trevor, Marcus said. Go away, but, now. His cousin left, already typing furiously on his haptic interface, probably updating his entire network. Marcus turned back to Natasha, who was watching him with something like amusement. That's going to be all over the social feeds in 3 minutes, she said. Your sandwich okay? She blinked. Then smiled, genuinely this time. Yeah. It's perfect. They finished eating in comfortable silence, the party's noise a distant hum. When they returned to the main room, the atmosphere had shifted. People were staring, not quite openly but enough. Trevor had done his work. Marcus caught Victoria's expression across the room, shock, calculation, something that might have been anger. I should go, Natasha said quietly. Before this becomes a thing. Too late, Marcus said, watching Richard make his way toward them with predatory focus. Marcus. Richard's smile was all teeth. You didn't mention you knew Ms. Volkov. Didn't know it was relevant. Not relevant? Natasha Volkov is one of the most influential people in tech. Her AI framework is the industry standard. Richard turned to her, switching to his networking voice. Ms. Volkov, it's an honor. Richard Thornwood, perhaps you've heard of Thornwood Capital? I haven't. Natasha's tone was polite and final. Richard's smile froze. Well, we've been making significant moves in the AI investment space. I'd love to discuss some opportunities. I'm not taking meetings tonight. She glanced at Marcus. Walk me out. Sure. They escaped while Richard was still processing the rejection, moving through the crowd that parted like water, everyone pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Outside, the night air was cool, the city's skyline a glitter of lights and advertising holograms. Natasha's car was waiting, an actual driver, not automated. Old money move, or maybe just someone who valued privacy. Sorry about that, Marcus said. My family's not great with boundaries. Not your fault. She paused at the car door. Can I give you a ride somewhere? I took the train, then definitely let me drive you. Consider it payment for the sandwich. The car's interior was quiet luxury, real leather, no screens, no AI assistant chirping suggestions. Just space and silence. They drove through the city, and Marcus watched the neighborhood shift from Victoria's wealthy enclave to his own decidedly middle-income area. This is fine, he said, pointing to his building. Thanks for the ride, Marcus. Natasha turned in her seat. What you said earlier, about choosing differently. Do you regret it? He thought about Station 47, the guys he worked with. The people they helped. Thought about his apartment with its second-hand furniture and the youth shelter where he volunteered. Thought about Victoria's mansion and Richard's networking and Trevor's desperate status seeking. No, he said. I don't. Good. She pulled out her phone, an old model, no neural interface. If you ever want to get another sandwich, or just escape from your family's bullshit, call me. She was gone before he could respond, the car pulling smoothly into traffic. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, looking at the number on his screen, trying to figure out what had just happened. His phone buzzed. Victoria, what the hell, Marcus? You've been holding out on us? You know Natasha Volkov? I met her tonight. Same as you, don't play dumb. She gave you her number. Her actual number. Do you know how many people would kill for that, Vic? We need to talk about this. Properly. Come to brunch tomorrow. Richard wants to discuss. I'm working tomorrow, Marcus, this is important. She's important. You need to handle this right. He hung up. The phone immediately rang again. He turned it off. Inside his apartment, Marcus dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off his shoes, and fell onto his couch. The space was small but his, no smart glass, no AI assistants, no feeds tracking his every move. Just quiet. He looked at Natasha's number for a long moment. Then set the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring more pressure from Victoria, more calculation from Richard, more everything he'd spent years avoiding. But tonight, he'd eaten sandwiches with someone who looked at him like he was a person, not a potential connection. His phone buzzed despite being off. Emergency override. Station calling, Chen here, we got a big one, Captain Rodriguez said. Corporate jet crashed at Westfield Airport. Multiple casualties, fire spreading. Need all hands. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his keys, his mind shifting into work mode. 5 minutes, the street was empty as he ran to his truck. Above, a news drone was already heading toward the airport. Its lights blinking against the dark. Somewhere in the city, Victoria was probably still at her party, networking. Richard was collecting business cards. Trevor was updating his feeds, and Marcus was going to pull people out of burning wreckage, because that's what he did. That's who he chose to be. The airport was chaos, emergency vehicles, smoke, the jet's tail section collapsed and burning. Marcus grabbed his gear from the truck, suited up, and ran toward the fire. Captain Rodriguez was coordinating teams, her voice cutting through the noise. Chen, take Johnson and Ramirez. We got reports of someone still inside the forward cabin. They moved in, the heat immediate and crushing. Smoke made visibility almost zero. Marcus's heads-up display showed thermal readings, structural integrity warnings, oxygen levels. The cabin was a twisted maze of metal and fire. There, Johnson pointed. A figure slumped against a bulkhead, unconscious. They worked fast, clearing debris, checking for spinal injury, getting the victim onto a stretcher. The plane groaned, something in the structure giving way. Marcus grabbed one end of the stretcher. Move, they ran, the cabin collapsing behind them in a shower of sparks and screaming metal. Outside, paramedics took over, and Marcus pulled off his helmet, sucking in clean air. His hands were shaking with adrenaline. Captain Rodriguez clapped his shoulder. Good work. That's two you pulled out tonight, Marcus nodded, unable to speak yet. He watched the paramedics work, watched firefighters containing the blaze, watched the machinery of emergency response doing what it did best. This was real. This mattered. This was worth missing Victoria's party and Richard's networking and Trevor's feed updates. Someone tapped his arm. A paramedic, young guy, looking concerned. Chen? The woman you pulled out, she's asking for you. I didn't get her name, she says she knows you. Marcus Chen, right? Confused, Marcus followed him to the ambulance. The woman on the stretcher was covered in soot, oxygen mask over her face, but her eyes were open and familiar. Natasha Volkov looked up at him and tried to smile around the mask. Shit, Marcus said. She pulled the mask aside. Hey. About that sandwich, you were on that plane, board meeting in Tokyo. Turned around early because the numbers were boring. She coughed, winced. Worst decision ever. The paramedic pushed Marcus aside gently. We need to get her to the hospital. Possible smoke inhalation, definitely some burns. I'm fine, Natasha protested weakly. You're going to the hospital, the paramedic said firmly. Marcus watched them load her into the ambulance, his mind still trying to process. Of all the people, all the possible victims, he'd pulled out Natasha Volkov. The woman he'd eaten sandwiches with 3 hours ago. The woman his family would absolutely lose their minds over. His phone buzzed. It had somehow turned itself back on, or the emergency override had stayed active. Victoria's face filled the screen. Video call, Marcus. Oh my God. Are you at the airport? CNN is saying there was a crash. I'm fine, thank God. Look, about earlier, I was too pushy. But seriously, we need to talk about Natasha Volkov. She was on the plane, Vic, silence. Then, what? The jet that crashed. Natasha was on it, he could see Victoria calculating, processing. She's alive. I pulled her out, more silence. Then Victoria's expression shifted into something Marcus recognized from childhood, the look she got when she saw an opportunity and was already planning how to exploit it. Marcus, she said carefully. This is huge. You saved her life. Do you understand what this means? It means someone's alive who might not have been. It means you're a hero. Her hero. This is, God, the optics alone. Marcus hung up again. This time he pulled the battery. The night stretched on, reports to file, gear to clean, debrief with the captain. By the time Marcus got home, the sun was rising and his entire body ached. He showered, scrubbing off smoke and soot, and fell into bed without bothering to check his messages. He dreamed of fire and twisted metal, of Victoria's calculating smile, of Natasha's eyes looking up at him through the smoke. When he woke, it was afternoon and someone was pounding on his door. Marcus stumbled out of bed, pulled on sweatpants, and opened the door. A woman with a camera pushed forward immediately. Marcus Chen? How does it feel to save a billionaire's life? Behind her, the street was packed. News vans, reporters, cameras, neighbors gawking from porches. Marcus stared, brain still fuzzy from sleep. Did Natasha Volkov offer a reward? Are you two in contact? How did you know she was on that plane? He retreated inside, locked the door, and leaned against it. Through the window, he could see them setting up, preparing for a siege. His phone, battery reinstalled at some point, he couldn't remember, showed 47 missed calls. Marcus made coffee and sat at his laptop. Googled Natasha Volkov, the results flooded his screen. Photos of her at MIT graduation, young and serious. Articles about her company, her AI frameworks, her revolutionary approach to tech ethics. Her net worth, $40 billion, youngest self-made woman on the Forbes list. Profiles calling her a genius, a recluse, notoriously private. No public appearances in 5 years, and now photos from last night, grainy shots of her being loaded into an ambulance, clearer ones of Marcus in his firefighting gear. Headlines screaming, tech billionaire survives plane crash and mystery firefighter saves Natasha Volkov. He studied her official photos, poised, untouchable, every inch the tech mogul. They didn't match the woman who'd eaten sandwiches in Victoria's kitchen and said, "Most people know who I am," with exhaustion in her voice. They didn't match the woman who'd asked if his career choices mattered and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. His phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. And again. Finally, he checked the messages. Victoria, oh my God, Marcus, call me. Richard, brother. We need to talk strategy. Trevor, dude. Natasha Volkov. You're a legend. Amanda, his cousin, can you get me her autograph? Or a photo? For content, 17 voicemails from Victoria, increasingly frantic. 3 from Richard, increasingly strategic. Even one from his father. Robert Chen, who he hadn't spoken to in 6 months. Marcus. We should talk. What you did was extraordinary. Call me. He turned the phone off again and finished his coffee, watching the news cruise through his window like they were a nature documentary. Somewhere in a hospital, Natasha was probably dealing with her own circus. He wondered if she was okay, if the burns were serious, if she was regretting giving him her number. His stomach growled. The kitchen was empty. He'd meant to go shopping yesterday before Victoria's party derailed everything. The reporters outside showed no signs of leaving. Marcus got dressed properly, pulled on a jacket, and opened his door. The crowd surged forward. He held up a hand. I'm going to work. No comment. Please move. They shouted questions anyway, but he pushed through, got to his truck, and drove away with a news van following. He lost them in traffic, one advantage of knowing the city's emergency routes, and headed to Station 47. The station was his refuge, familiar and solid. But even here, things had shifted. The guys mobbed him the moment he walked in, genuine congratulations, bear hugs, pride, chin. You magnificent bastard. Johnson lifted him off his feet. Front page hero, it was just a rescue, Marcus protested. Captain Rodriguez appeared, waving everyone back. Give him room, you animals. She studied Marcus. And he saw approval in her eyes. Real approval, not performance. You made us all look good, Chen. But more importantly, you brought someone home. That's what counts. The tension in Marcus's chest eased slightly. This was real respect. Not because of who he'd saved or what it meant for anyone's image. Just because he'd done the job right. Later, during a quiet moment in the equipment bay, a delivery truck pulled up. The driver brought in a massive fruit basket, expensive and elaborate. The card read, "Thank you for my life." Envy, the guys whistled and hooted. Marcus found himself smiling despite everything. Your girlfriend? Ramirez teased, I met her once before last night. And saved her life. That's a hell of a second date. Marcus's phone buzzed, he'd turned it back on out of habit. Victoria, again. He almost declined, then answered out of morbid curiosity, Marcus, darling, we're having people over tonight. Celebrating your heroism. You have to come. Her tone was desperate, cheerful, trying too hard. Marcus could picture her perfectly, in her home office, probably with Richard beside her, both of them planning how to maximize this opportunity. I don't think, please. I know I was pushy yesterday. But you're my brother. Let us celebrate you properly. 7 o'clock, against every instinct, Marcus heard himself say, I'll think about it. Wonderful. See you then. She hung up before he could clarify. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. You're going to your sister's party? After she tried to stick you in the kitchen last night, I want to see how shameless they'll be, Marcus admitted. Scientific curiosity, that's going to hurt, man, probably, but he went anyway, driving back to Victoria's mansion as the sun set, wondering what fresh hell awaited. The house was packed again, same guests as yesterday, but now they swarmed Marcus the moment he walked in. Gerald, who'd barely acknowledged him yesterday, pumped his hand enthusiastically. Always knew you were special, Marcus. That firefighter instinct, priceless. Claudia, who'd seated him with the caterers, air-kissed both cheeks. You're so brave. Can I interview you for my podcast? Richard appeared with his arm around Marcus's shoulders like they were best friends. My brother-in-law, everyone. Always told him public service was noble work. Marcus stood in the center of the attention, numb. This was worse than yesterday's dismissal. At least then they'd been honest about finding him disappointing. Now they were performing care, performing pride, performing family unity for an audience that included several journalists Victoria had clearly invited. Amanda cornered him by the champagne drone, her phone out and recording. Marcus. Cousin. Tell me everything about the rescue. My followers are dying to know. Amanda, you literally called me the weird one at Christmas, did I? I don't remember that. She laughed, bright and false. We've always been close though, right? Family first. Trevor appeared, freshly groomed and wearing his best networking clothes. Dude, seriously, can you introduce me to Natasha? When she's out of the hospital, I mean. I have this startup idea. No, come on, man. Family helps family. That's what we do. Marcus looked around the room, at Victoria holding court near the smart glass wall, at Richard glad handing a tech journalist, at his relatives suddenly pretending years of dismissal and condescension had never happened. The performance was flawless. They'd rewritten history between yesterday and today, and they all believed their own fiction. Victoria clinked a glass, drawing attention. Everyone. A toast. The room quieted. To my incredible baby brother, Marcus. Who reminds us that true heroism comes in many forms. They raised glasses. Cameras flashed. Someone started clapping, and it spread through the crowd. Marcus stood there, accepting applause that meant nothing from people who'd looked through him 24 hours ago. He caught Richard whispering to a guest, "We're actually very close. I'm thinking of endowing a scholarship in his name. Good optics for the fund." Something cold settled in Marcus's chest. Not anger, exactly. Just clarity. This was who they were. This was who they'd always been. And he'd known it, but seeing it performed so perfectly, so shamelessly, crystallized something. He found Victoria in her study later, updating her social feeds with photos from the party. She looked up, smiling. Great turnout, right? CNN might run a piece. This is obscene, even for you. Her smile froze. Excuse me? 3 days ago you were seating me with the staff. Now you're throwing me a party? Marcus, don't be dramatic. We're family. Your success is our success. My success? I did my job. That's all, and we're proud. Why can't you just accept that? He studied his sister, the woman who'd shared a bedroom with him when they were kids. Before the money came. Before she'd learned to weaponize every interaction, because 3 days ago, Vic, I heard you. Both of you. She froze. What? In the hallway. Before dinner. You told Richard you were seating me in the kitchen because I didn't add value to the room. The color drained from Victoria's face. I never. She stopped. Recalculated. Fine. Yes. We underestimated you. Can't we celebrate you now? You're not celebrating me. You're celebrating what I can do for your image, and that's different from you judging us how. It was a fair hit, and Marcus felt it land. He had judged them. Was judging them. Standing in moral superiority because he'd chosen differently, but he also knew the difference between judgment and boundary. I'm going, he said. Marcus, thanks for the party, Vic, really memorable. He left her there, navigating back through the crowd that barely noticed his departure. They'd gotten their photos, their content, their brush with his momentary relevance. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. His truck was parked between a Tesla and an automated luxury sedan. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, not starting the engine, just breathing. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then saw the message preview. It's Natasha. They're releasing me tomorrow. Still up for that sandwich? Marcus stared at the text, something loosening in his chest. In the middle of the circus, here was something real. Someone who'd asked about his choices and meant it. Who'd given him her number before knowing he'd save her life. He typed back, yeah. I know a place. The response came immediately, perfect. And Marcus? Thank you. For everything. He drove home through the city, past the glittering towers and the advertising holograms and the neighborhoods where people like Victoria lived their carefully curated lives. His apartment was dark and quiet and his. No smart glass. No AI assistants. No performance, just space to be himself. Tomorrow would bring more pressure, more calculation, more everything. But tonight, he'd stood in the center of his family's revisionist history and seen it clearly. That was worth something, and tomorrow, he'd have coffee with someone who made him think maybe. Just maybe, not everyone was performing all the time. Marcus fell asleep on his couch, still in his clothes, dreaming of fire and sandwiches and dark eyes looking at him like he mattered. Marcus Chen's phone buzzed against the scarred wooden table, the haptic pulse more insistent than usual. He ignored it, focusing instead on the kid across from him, Dante, 15, all angles and defiance, pretending the chess game didn't matter while his knee bounced under the table like a jackhammer. Your move, Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. The Riverside Youth Center hummed around them with its familiar soundtrack, sneakers squeaking on linoleum, someone's music leaking from cheap earbuds. The ancient HVAC system grinding like it was chewing gravel. Dante's fingers hovered over his knight, pulled back, went for a pawn instead. Marcus saw the trap 3 moves out but said nothing. Learning hurt more than being told. The phone buzzed again. Through his peripheral vision, Marcus caught the notification. Victoria, his sister, her contact photo updated to some professionally lit headshot that probably cost more than his monthly grocery bill. He swiped it away. You gonna get that? Dante asked, studying the board with feigned disinterest. Nope, could be important. It's not. The kid moved his pawn. Marcus advanced his bishop, and Dante's face went through the predictable cycle: confusion, realization, annoyance. He'd lost his rook in 2 moves and didn't see it coming. Damn. Dante leaned back, arms crossed. You set me up. You set yourself up. I just didn't stop you. That's cold, man. That's chess. Marcus started resetting the pieces. Again, but Dante was looking at Marcus's phone, which had lit up with another message. This one displayed on the lock screen long enough for both of them to see. Marcus, darling, please confirm for Saturday. Victoria, the kid's eyebrow went up. Your sister calls you darling, only when she wants something. What Saturday? Marcus shrugged, arranging pawns with more attention than they required. Some party. Tech people, investors, the usual crowd that pretends I don't exist until they need a story about humble public service. You going? Probably. Why? If they're assholes. Marcus looked up, caught the genuine curiosity in Dante's face. The kid had been bouncing between foster homes for 3 years, knew something about complicated family dynamics. Because she's still my sister. And because sometimes you show up just to prove you can. Dante nodded slowly, processing this. That's some philosophical shit right there. Language. There's literally nobody here who cares, Chief. He wasn't wrong. The center supervisor had left an hour ago, trusting Marcus with the closing routine. It was Thursday, which meant the place was nearly empty. Most kids were at court-mandated family therapy or dodging it entirely. Marcus's phone rang this time, the actual voice call that meant Victoria was escalating. He silenced it. You're really not gonna answer? I'll call her back. When I'm ready to deal with whatever performance she's rehearsed. He didn't add. They played another game. Dante lost again but took longer doing it, which counted as progress. By the time Marcus locked up and headed to his truck, a decade-old Ford that predated the mandatory AI driving assists. The sky had shifted from gray to that particular urban darkness that wasn't quite black, more like charcoal smudged with light pollution. He called Victoria from the parking lot, engine running, heat blasting against the November chill. She answered on the first ring. Finally. I was beginning to think you'd died, just busy. What's up, Saturday? The gathering. You confirmed weeks ago, then went radio silent. Her voice had that practiced lightness that meant she was annoyed but hiding it. Victoria had perfected the art of sounding perpetually pleasant, even when she was sharpening knives. I remember. I'll be there, wonderful. It starts at 7, cocktail attire, and Marcus, please try to look presentable. Richard's partners will be there, some people from the tech sector, a few journalists. It's important. Cocktail attire, he repeated, watching his breath fog the windshield. Got it, I'm serious. This isn't one of your fire station barbecues. Something in her tone made his jaw tighten. I know how to dress, Vic, of course you do. I just meant, she paused, recalculating. We're proud of you. You know that. The work you do matters. It's just different from our world, different. The word she used when she meant lesser but couldn't say it out loud. I'll see you Saturday, Marcus said and hung up before she could add another qualifier. He drove home through streets he'd navigated 1,000 times, past the coffee shop where he knew every barista's name, past the corner store with the clerk who always asked about his latest rescue. Past the demographic line where gleaming smart buildings gave way to older construction with actual character. His apartment building was walking distance from the station, a deliberate choice that saved commute time and kept him grounded in the neighborhood he served. The place was small, one bedroom with a kitchen that doubled as dining room, but it was his. No biometric locks, no climate control that learned his preferences and adjusted before he arrived, no smart glass walls that tinted based on his mood. Just a door with a regular key and windows that opened when he wanted fresh air. He microwaved leftover pasta, ate standing at the counter while scrolling through messages he'd been avoiding. Trevor, his cousin, had sent a gif of someone doing a backflip with the caption, "You at Vic's party," trying to impress the rich people. Amanda, another cousin, wanted to know if he was bringing a date because there'll be cute tech bros there. His father, Robert Chen, had forwarded an article about firefighter salaries with no comment, which was somehow worse than an actual criticism. Marcus deleted them all and went to bed early, setting his alarm for 5. The station didn't care about his family drama, and tomorrow they had equipment checks scheduled before the shift started. Saturday arrived with the inevitability of a dental appointment. Marcus spent the morning at the gym, sparring with Johnson from his crew until they were both dripping sweat and laughing about the tourist who'd called 911 because a pigeon had entered his hotel room. He grabbed lunch at Rosie's Diner, where the owner insisted on giving him extra fries because you're too skinny, you run into buildings for a living, eat something. By 5 o'clock, he was standing in his bedroom, staring at his closet like it might offer guidance. He owned 2 suits, one for funerals, one for occasions when Victoria insisted on presentable. He chose the latter, navy with a subtle pinstripe, paired with a shirt that was only slightly wrinkled if you didn't look too close. The drive to Victoria's estate took 40 minutes. Long enough for him to question this decision multiple times. She'd married Richard Thornwood 3 years ago, and they'd bought a place in the kind of neighborhood where every house had a name instead of just an address. The Thornwood residence. Marcus always thought it sounded like a resort or a psychiatric facility. Cars lined the circular driveway, Tesla electrics with their whisper-quiet engines, a few traditional luxury models that screamed old money, one helicopter on the lawn because apparently someone needed to make an entrance. Marcus parked his Ford behind a topiary shaped like something abstract and expensive, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and reminded himself that he'd faced burning buildings with more calm than this. The front door was open, warm light and conversation spilling onto the steps. A woman with an earpiece and tablet stood just inside, checking names against a list. She smiled at Marcus with professional courtesy that didn't reach her eyes. Name, Marcus Chen. I'm Victoria's brother. Her expression shifted microscopically, surprise, recalculation, a quick glance at his truck visible through the doorway. Of course, Welcome. The main reception is through there, bar to your left, hors d'oeuvres circulating. He nodded and stepped into his sister's world. The house had been remodeled since his last visit, all the walls now smart glass that shifted from transparent to frosted based on proximity sensors. Through them, he could see the great room, vaulted ceilings, furniture that looked sculptural rather than comfortable, art on the walls that probably had names and values he didn't care to know. Guests clustered in groups, their conversations a low hum punctuated by laughter that sounded rehearsed. A drone glided past carrying champagne flutes on an illuminated tray, its navigation system chirping softly as it avoided a woman in a dress that cost more than his rent. The thing had a holographic display showing vintage ears and tasting notes. Marcus stared at it, momentarily hypnotized by the casual excess. Marcus, Victoria materialized from a conversation circle, her dress shifting colors as she moved, currently a serene blue that Marcus recognized from her social media branding. She'd gotten the latest interface implant, the subtle shimmer at her temple that let her access her feeds and messages with a thought. The technology was 3 months old and already ubiquitous among her crowd, a status symbol disguised as convenience. She air-kissed near his cheek, close enough to perform affection for anyone watching, far enough to avoid actual contact. You made it. I wasn't sure you'd come. You sent 3 reminders, did I? The AI handles most of my scheduling now. She touched his elbow, steering him deeper into the room. Her fingers were cold despite the house's perfect climate control. Come, you remember Richard. Her husband appeared with the efficiency of someone who'd been monitoring their approach. Probably through his own implant feed. Richard Thornwood was 42 but maintained himself with the dedication of someone who viewed aging as a personal failure. His handshake was firm, and Marcus felt the slight resistance of the man's biometric ring scanning him, checking identity, probably running a quick background verification, maybe pulling up his social profile and net worth in Richard's augmented vision. Marcus. Good to see you. Richard's tone suggested it was anything but. Still with the fire department, still saving lives, Marcus said, keeping his voice even. Of course, of course. Noble work. Richard's attention had already shifted to someone over Marcus's shoulder. Someone who registered higher on whatever algorithm determined importance. Excuse me, Senator Harrigan just arrived. We'll catch up later. He was gone before Marcus could respond, leaving Victoria with an expression that cycled through embarrassment, irritation, and finally settling on her default pleasant neutrality. He's been stressed, she said, which wasn't an apology but wanted to sound like one. The fund's expanding into Southeast Asian markets, and the regulatory landscape is complicated. Sure, mingle. There's food, obviously. The sushi chef is using that new molecular technique. Each piece is individually customized based on your genetic taste profile. You'll love it. She paused, recalibrating. Or there's regular food in the kitchen. If you prefer, regular food. As opposed to the genetically customized sushi for people whose wealth allowed them to treat meals like science experiments. Marcus watched his sister's face, searching for the girl who used to steal his lunch money to buy manga, who'd cried at their mother's funeral while he held her hand, who'd once told him she was proud of his choice to become a firefighter. That person was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of performance and optimization. I'll figure it out, he said. Victoria smiled, relieved to be released from the obligation of managing him. Great. I should. There are some people I need to greet. Make yourself comfortable. She glided away, her dress shifting to a warm amber as she entered a new conversation group, probably algorithmically designed to make her appear welcoming and energetic. Marcus stood alone in the middle of his sister's great room, surrounded by people who existed in a different economic atmosphere, and decided that the kitchen sounded perfect. The hallway leading there was quieter, lined with digital art that morphed and shifted, abstract patterns that responded to movement, to sound, to metrics Marcus couldn't identify. One piece caught his attention, a swirl of orange and black that looked like fire contained in glass. He stopped, studying it, trying to determine if he hated it or was just annoyed by what it represented. Hideous, isn't it? Marcus turned. A woman stood in the intersecting hallway, holding a champagne flute and looking at the art with unconcealed disdain. She was roughly his age, dark hair pulled back in a style that was either effortless or required significant effort to appear effortless. Her dress was simple black, expensive in its lack of ornamentation, and she wore no visible tech, no implant glow, no smart jewelry, no augmented reality makeup adjusting to the lighting. I was thinking pretentious, Marcus said, that too. She sipped her champagne, still studying the art. Let me guess, you're not one of the usual crowd, that obvious? You're looking at the art like it's supposed to mean something. Everyone else just checks the artist's market value on their feed. She tilted her head, examining him with the same attention she'd given the painting. Also, your shirt has a button missing. Marcus glanced down. Third button, hanging by a thread he'd been meaning to fix for 2 weeks. Laundry incident, tragic. But she was smiling, just slightly, like they were sharing a joke at the party's expense. I'm going to hate myself for asking, but, are you Victoria's brother? Guilty. You here for the spectacle? Something like that. She moved closer, and Marcus caught a hint of her perfume, something subtle that probably cost more per ounce than his cologne cost per bottle. She talks about you sometimes. The firefighter. The one who chose differently. She make it sound like a compliment, she made it sound like a curiosity. Like someone who speaks a language she used to know but can't quite remember. The woman extended her hand, no bioscanners, no performance. Just a handshake. I'm Natasha. Her grip was firm, her palm dry despite the champagne. Marcus liked her immediately, which meant she was probably married to a venture capitalist or owned 3 startups. Marcus. And yeah, I'm the family disappointment. Are you disappointed? The question landed differently than expected. Not rhetorical, not performative. Actually curious, like the answer mattered to someone other than him. Marcus thought about Dante, about the chess games and the careful work of earning trust one move at a time. Thought about Station 47 and the guys who had his back without calculating what it cost them. Thought about the last fire he'd walked into, the family he'd pulled out, the way their gratitude had felt more valuable than any promotion Victoria's world could offer. No, he said, surprising himself with the honesty. But their loss. Natasha finished her champagne, set the glass on a passing drone's tray with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times and was tired of the novelty. The kitchen, you said? I could use some regular food myself. They walked together. And Marcus tried not to notice the way she moved, confident but careful, like someone used to being watched but exhausted by the performance. The kitchen was enormous and mercifully empty, all gleaming surfaces and appliances that probably had more computing power than his entire apartment building. He found bread in a drawer that was temperature controlled for optimal freshness, pulled out sandwich materials from a refrigerator that suggested recipes based on his selections. Want one? He offered, already assembling turkey and cheese. God, yes, they ate standing at the island counter, and it felt absurdly normal. Through the doorway, the party continued its symphony of networking and status measurement. Everyone's implants glowing faintly as they exchanged contact information with a thought, checked stock prices in real time, documented moments for their social feeds that would be algorithmically optimized before posting. Do you ever miss it? Natasha asked, watching him eat. Being part of that world, I was never part of it. Victoria was the golden child. I was the project that didn't pan out. What did they want you to be? Anything expensive. Doctor, lawyer, tech executive. Something they could quantify at parties, something that would show a proper return on investment for 18 years of private school and connections. He took another bite, chewed, swallowed. What about you? What's your quantifiable achievement? She laughed, short and sharp, like he'd accidentally hit something true. You really don't know who I am, should I? Most people do. It's... She paused, something shifting in her expression. Vulnerability, maybe. Or relief. It's exhausting. Before Marcus could respond, footsteps thundered into the kitchen. Trevor burst through the doorway, his cousin's augmented reality contact lenses flickering with overlaid information, probably social feeds, stock tickers, facial recognition software identifying everyone in his field of vision. He stopped short seeing them, his eyes going wide. Marcus! There you are. And, holy shit. Trevor's lenses were definitely scanning now, pulling up information, making connections. Natasha Volkov. You're Natasha Volkov. The woman, Natasha Volkov, apparently, sighed like she'd been through this routine too many times to count. And you're about to be very loud about it. You're eating a sandwich in Victoria's kitchen. Trevor looked between them, his brain visibly recalibrating the social mathematics. With Marcus, he makes good sandwiches, Natasha said, her tone suggesting the conversation was over. Marcus pieced it together from Trevor's reaction, the name, the careful anonymity, the way she'd said most people do like it was a burden. You're the tech person. The AI ethics thing, among other things. She met his eyes directly, searching for something. Does it matter, should it? Trevor made a strangled noise. Dude, she's worth like $40 billion. She revolutionized ethical AI frameworks. Her company's valuation is, Trevor, Marcus said, voice flat. Go away, but, now, his cousin left, already typing furiously on his haptic interface, probably updating his entire network about this development. Marcus turned back to Natasha, who was watching him with something that might have been amusement or might have been the early stages of trust. That's going to be all over the social feeds in 3 minutes. She said, your sandwich okay? She blinked. Then smiled, genuinely this time, something warm that transformed her entire face. Yeah. It's perfect. They finished eating in comfortable silence, the party's noise reduced to a distant hum that felt like it was happening in another dimension. When they finally returned to the main room, the atmosphere had shifted. People were staring, not quite openly but enough. Trevor had done his work efficiently. Marcus caught Victoria's expression across the room, shock cycling to calculation cycling to something that might have been anger or might have been opportunistic excitement. She was already moving toward them, her dress shifting to an energetic coral that probably tested well with tech investors. I should go, Natasha said quietly, reading the room with the expertise of someone who'd spent years being the most interesting person anywhere she appeared. Before this becomes a thing. Too late, Marcus said, watching Richard materialize from a conversation group with predatory focus. Marcus. Richard's smile was all performed warmth and calculated interest. You didn't mention you knew Ms. Volkov, didn't know it was relevant, not relevant? Natasha Volkov is one of the most influential people in tech. Her AI framework is the industry standard, her company's partnership spans 6 continents, and her ethical guidelines have been adopted by, he cut himself off, pivoting to Natasha with a different energy. Ms. Volkov, it's an honor. Richard Thornwood, perhaps you've heard of Thornwood Capital? We've been making significant moves in the AI investment space, particularly focusing on, I haven't, Natasha interrupted, her tone polite and final as a closed door. Richard's smile froze, his brain struggling to process rejection from someone he'd categorized as a potential asset. Well, we've been making significant moves in the space. I'd love to discuss some opportunities, perhaps a meeting next week to explore. I'm not taking meetings tonight. She glanced at Marcus, something passing between them that felt like a shared understanding of how exhausting this all was. Walk me out? Sure. They escaped while Richard was still processing the deflection, moving through the crowd that parted like water around Natasha's presence. Everyone was pretending not to watch while absolutely watching, their implants probably flagging the moment for later content creation, relationship mapping, value assessment. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean after the party's recycled atmosphere. Natasha's car was waiting, an actual driver, human not automated, which was either an old money affectation or a privacy measure. Maybe both. Sorry about that, Marcus said, shoving his hands in his pockets. My family's not great with boundaries, not your fault. She paused at the car door, turning to face him fully. Can I give you a ride somewhere? I took my truck, that ancient Ford. She'd noticed. Of course she'd noticed. Then definitely let me drive you. Consider it payment for the sandwich and the honest conversation. Both are surprisingly rare. The car's interior was quiet luxury, real leather, no screens, no AI assistant chirping suggestions about optimal routes or nearby restaurants. Just space and silence and the city lights sliding past the windows. They drove through neighborhoods that shifted from Victoria's wealthy enclave to middle-income areas where buildings had character instead of smart glass. "This is fine," Marcus said, pointing to his building. "Thanks for the ride, Marcus." Natasha turned in her seat, and he realized how close they were in the car's intimate darkness. "What you said earlier, about choosing differently. Do you regret it?" He thought about Station 47, the guys who showed up every shift ready to run toward danger with him. Thought about Dante learning chess moves that might teach him how to think 3 steps ahead in life. Thought about the last family he'd carried out of a burning building, the father's hand gripping his shoulder in wordless gratitude. Thought about Victoria's party, Richard's networking, Trevor's desperate calculation of value. "No," he said. "I don't." "Good." She pulled out her phone, an older model. No neural interface, no constant connectivity. Just a tool she controlled instead of one that monitored her. "If you ever want to get another sandwich, or just escape from your family's bullshit, call me." She was gone before he could form a response, the car pulling smoothly into traffic and disappearing. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, looking at the number on his screen, trying to figure out what had just happened. A woman worth $40 billion had eaten sandwiches with him in his sister's kitchen and given him her personal number after he'd explicitly not been impressed by her wealth. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, what the hell, Marcus? You've been holding out on us? You know Natasha Volkov? I met her tonight." "Same as you, don't play dumb. She gave you her number. Her actual personal number. Do you know how many people would kill for that kind of access? Richard's been trying to get a meeting with her team for 6 months. Vic, we need to talk about this. Properly. Come to brunch tomorrow. Richard wants to discuss how to approach." "I'm working tomorrow, Marcus, this is important." "She's important. You need to handle this right, leverage the connection while it's fresh. This could be huge for." He hung up. The phone immediately rang again. He turned it off completely, removing the battery for good measure. Inside his apartment, Marcus dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off his dress shoes, and fell onto his couch. The space was small but his, no smart glass, no AI assistants, no feeds tracking his every move and suggesting optimizations. Just quiet. He looked at Natasha's number for a long moment, then set the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring more pressure from Victoria, more calculation from Richard, more of everything he'd spent years avoiding. But tonight, he'd eaten sandwiches with someone who'd looked at him like he was a person instead of a potential connection, who'd asked if he regretted his choices and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. His emergency pager went off, the old-school device he still carried because it worked when everything else failed. Station calling for all hands. Corporate jet crashed at Westfield Airport, multiple casualties, fire spreading. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his keys, his mind shifting into the mode where nothing existed except the mission. He didn't think about Victoria or Richard or the party he'd just escaped. Didn't think about Natasha Volkov or $40 billion or what it meant that she'd given him her number. He just ran toward the fire, because that's what he did. That's who he'd chosen to be. And somewhere in the burning wreckage waiting for him, his entire life was about to change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine.